CEO sees a waitress feeding a hungry child. What he discovered shocked him.
There is a kind of hunger that makes no sound. It hides behind smiles. It stands straight even when the legs are weak. It keeps working even when the eyes grow dim. This is the story of a woman who carried that hunger every single day, and the powerful man who watched her from across a polished room and did not understand what he was seeing. Not yet. Ethan Vale noticed everything in a room. Stock numbers, weak handshakes, the wrong fork on a table. He had built his luxury hotel empire from one small property into 12 towers. He was 39 years old and had never once been late to a meeting. That Tuesday evening, he sat at his corner table in the five-star restaurant, waiting for a business associate who was already 7 minutes late. He lifted his water glass. That was when he first noticed her, a waitress across the room. Pale. Moving carefully like someone walking on a surface that might crack. She steadied herself against a serving cart when she thought no one was looking. Ethan watched her for exactly 4 seconds. Then he looked back at his papers. He did not yet know that those 4 seconds would change everything. Her name was Mara. She had worked the evening shift for 11 months, always on time, never dropped a plate. She smiled at guests the way the training manual described, warm, brief, professional. Nobody looked closely enough to see what was behind the smile. During the staff meal break that night, Ethan passed through the corridor near the back room. The door was half open. He glanced in. Mara sat at the small wooden table with a bowl of rice in front of her. Other staff ate quickly, talking, laughing, but Mara sat very still, staring at her bowl. She did not eat. Instead, she pulled out a small plastic container and began spooning her food into it. Half the rice, half the beans. Then she added water from her cup, tilting the container gently to spread the food thinner. She was stretching it, making it look like more. Footsteps approached. Mara's hands moved fast. The container disappeared into her apron pocket in one smooth motion, and she placed her spoon back beside the now half-empty bowl. She pretended to eat. Ethan stood in the corridor a moment longer than he should have. Something pressed at the back of his mind, quiet but persistent. Then he walked on. The next night, Ethan came back. He told himself it was for another late meeting, but when his associate called to reschedule, he did not leave. He ordered coffee and sat in the same corner, watching the room the way he watched a Newmarket, quietly, without showing interest. Mara was clearing a table near the window. A guest had left a bread roll and a small bowl of soup untouched. Mara looked at them with something close to pain. She glanced left, then right. Then, with movements so smooth they could have been rehearsed, she folded the bread into a clean napkin, set the soup beside it, and tucked both gently under her serving tray. A manager appeared. "No leftovers leave this floor, Mara." "Yes, sir, of course." Her face showed nothing, but her hands gripped the tray tighter, just for one moment, like something had been taken from her. The manager walked on. Mara stood still for 2 breaths. Then she smiled, lifted the tray, and carried on. Ethan set down his coffee cup. He had run businesses for 15 years. He knew when someone was hiding something, but Mara did not look like someone stealing for herself. She looked like someone stealing for someone else. On the 3rd night, Ethan told his driver to wait. He found a seat near the corridor with a clear view of the back door, a heavy, gray door behind the kitchen, used only for trash. Not a place guests ever looked. The restaurant closed at 10. By 10:30, most staff had left through the front. Mara was last to finish. He watched her wipe down the final table with the slow care of someone tired, in a way that went deeper than her feet. Then she untied her apron and folded it once. But she did not walk toward the front door. She walked toward the gray door. She pushed it open with her shoulder. Both hands full. One held the small container, the other held the folded napkin from earlier, the one she'd kept despite the manager's clear words. Cold night air swept in, then the door swung shut. Ethan stood, walked to the gray door and pushed it open quietly. The alley behind the kitchen smelled of cold concrete and old cooking. A single yellow light buzzed above the dumpsters. Mara stood at the far end, very still, her back to him. She was not alone. The child stepped out from behind the dumpster the way a small animal steps from shadow, slowly, eyes wide, checking every corner before moving. He looked about 8 years old, thin in a way that went past skinny. His jacket was too short in the sleeves. His shoes did not match, but his eyes were sharp and careful, far older than his face.
Did they see you?
He whispered. His voice was low, practiced. Like fear was something he had learned to speak quietly. No. Mara said, "Nobody saw me." She knelt in the cold alley without caring about her uniform. She opened the container and spread the folded napkin on the ground like a tablecloth. She placed the food before the child gently, the way you set down something you cannot afford to spill. "Eat," she said softly. The child sat cross-legged and ate fast, the way people eat when never sure when the next meal is coming. Mara watched him and smiled. But Ethan, standing in the shadows by the door, saw her eyes. They were not smiling. They were watching the child's face the way a person watches something they are terrified of losing. From a distance, it looked like love. Up close, it looked like fear wearing love's face. The child finished the last grain of rice and looked up at Mara. His hand reached out and closed around her wrist, not grabbing for more food, but slowly, deliberately, like holding something fragile. On her wrist was a bracelet, old. The cord had once been blue, but faded to gray. Something was etched on the small, flat piece at the center, but Ethan was too far to read it.
You promised,
the child said. Mara's face changed. Just for a moment, a small collapse behind the eyes, like a wall taking a hit it was not ready for. Then she put it back together. "I know," she said, "and I'm keeping it." "He made you promise," the child said again, not accusing, just reminding, the way someone repeats what they fear forgetting. "I know, Joel," Mara said. She tucked his jacket collar up against his neck. Then she picked up the empty container and stood. "Go back inside. I'll come after my shift tomorrow." Joel nodded and slipped back behind the dumpsters into the dark. Mara stood alone, her hand pressed against the bracelet. Ethan stepped inside before she turned. His mind was already building a conclusion, but something about it kept knocking at the edges, refusing to settle. The next morning, Ethan called his head of security. "The waitress on the evening shift, Mara. I want a quiet watch on her, no confrontation." He sat back and told himself the facts. An employee was removing food without permission. That was theft. His job was to protect the business. But the security report came back 2 days later and was not what he expected. Mara had not touched a coin from the register. She had never been near the cash drawer. She had not taken expensive food, only leftovers already destined for the trash. She had given nothing to other staff members. She had taken nothing home for herself, only to the child. Ethan pulled up her employment file. Strong references, no complaints, high performance, never called in sick, never asked for a salary advance. Her salary was one of the lowest in the building. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling. In his world, things were usually clear. Someone was either a thief or they were not. Someone had a motive or they did not. Mara had a motive. He just could not name it. And that bothered him more than the theft itself ever could. 4 days later, Ethan was walking through the restaurant during the dinner rush when he saw it happen. Mara was carrying a tray with 3 full silver-domed plates, the heavy kind requiring both arms and steady balance. She was halfway across the floor when something changed in her face. Her skin went the color of old paper. Her steps slowed. She caught herself on the edge of a serving counter, one hand gripping the cold metal. The tray tilted. For one breathless second, everything seemed ready to fall. It didn't. She steadied it. She kept walking. A junior staff member had seen it too. He jogged over quietly. "Mara, sit. I'll finish that table." "I'm fine." "You nearly dropped." "I'm fine, Kofi." The tight practice smile. "Thank you." He pressed a wrapped biscuit into her hand. Eat something. You never eat. Mara looked at the biscuit for a moment. I can't, she said, and handed it back. Then, so quietly, Kofi almost missed it. He needs it more. Ethan, standing 10 feet away, pretending to check his phone, heard every word. He needs it more. He pocketed his phone and walked to the elevator, and for the first time in a long time felt uncertain about something that had nothing to do with business. That Thursday night, Ethan returned to the alley. He arrived before Mara, standing far enough in the shadows that the yellow dumpster light didn't reach him, the cold bit at his collar. He hadn't worn a heavy enough coat for standing outside, and he did not care. He waited. At 10:42, the gray door opened and Mara stepped out. Joel was already there, crouched beside the dumpster, arms around his knees. When he heard the door open, he pressed himself flat against the wall. "It's me," Mara said quickly. Joel's shoulders dropped. He let out a long, shaky breath.
I thought it was them.
He whispered. "I know it wasn't."
What if they find out where I am?
Mara knelt down. "They won't."
But if they take me to the shelter again?
Her voice was firm but quiet. "They will not take you. Not while I'm here, I promised your father." Joel was silent for a moment. Then he said,
Some shelters make you disappear.
It was the way he said it that made Ethan's chest tighten, not like a child repeating something he'd heard, like a child who already knew it was true, who had stored it in his body the way you store a scar. Ethan went home that night and sat in his penthouse kitchen for a long time. He poured a glass of water and did not drink it. He looked at the city lights and felt a pressure behind his eyes. Not sadness exactly, but something sitting close to it. The child's words stayed with him. Some shelters make you disappear. The next evening, Ethan walked close to Mara's section while she cleared a table. He let himself drift near enough to see her wrist. The bracelet again. The cord so worn it looked like it might snap if touched. The small flat piece at the center had an inscription, but the letters were too fine to read at this distance. Mara felt him nearby and turned. For a moment their eyes met. Her careful gaze meeting his steady one, she smiled the professional smile. Sealed. "Can I bring you something, sir?" "No." "Then, what is that bracelet?" Her hand moved to cover it immediately. "A gift." "From who?" A pause. So brief most people would have missed it. "Someone who trusted me," she said. Then she picked up her tray and walked away. Ethan watched her go and made a decision he hadn't made in years. He would stop guessing. He would follow. That Friday, Ethan did not tell his driver to come at the usual time. He waited inside a plain gray sedan across the street from the hotel's back entrance. A car his assistant arranged so it would not be recognized. He sat with the window cracked and watched the gray door. At 10:51, Mara came out. She turned left, away from the staff shuttle, away from the bus route. She walked quickly, head slightly down, taking side streets that grew quieter and darker, the kind of streets that don't appear on tourist maps. Ethan followed on foot at a distance, his steps soft. She did not take taxis, she did not stop. She walked 22 minutes through growing darkness until she reached a part of the city that looked like it had been forgotten by everyone with the power to remember it. Old buildings, broken street lamps, walls covered in peeling paint. She stopped in front of a building on the corner. 3 stories, most windows dark. One had plastic sheeting instead of glass. The front door tilted in its frame like a tired man leaning on a wall and no longer caring. Mara went inside. Ethan stopped on the pavement and looked up at the building. Then he followed her in. The inside smelled of cold and damp and something faintly sweet, like old wood struggling to hold itself together. The corridor was dark, except for thin lines of light under 2 doors. The floor was bare concrete. Pipes ran along the ceiling, taped together at the joints. But on the walls, Ethan stopped walking. At the height a child could reach, there were drawings, crayon and marker, houses with chimneys, stick figures holding hands, a sun in the corner of everyone, round and yellow with long, careful rays. Each drawing was taped straight, each one evenly spaced. like pictures in a gallery. Someone had tried to make this broken place feel like a home. Ethan stood in the corridor looking at them. Then he heard Mara's voice from behind the second door, so low and calm, telling Joel she'd brought food, that it was okay, that he could come out. Ethan did not knock. He moved to the far end of the corridor and stood in the shadow of the stairwell, back against the wall, listening. In 15 years of building his empire, he had never felt as uncertain of himself as he did right then, standing in the dark, looking at a child's drawing of a house with a yellow sun. Through the gap at the bottom of the door, a line of amber light spread across the concrete floor. Ethan heard Joel before he saw anything. The boy was asking questions in that careful, quiet voice. Not the curious voice of a child who feels safe, but the voice of one who has learned that noise can bring danger.
Did anyone follow you?
No, Joel.
Are you sure?
I walked the long way. I checked twice. Come and eat. A pause. The soft scrape of a chair. Ethan shifted slowly and found a narrow angle where the door had swung on its loose hinge. He could see a sliver of the room. A mattress on the floor with a folded blanket on top. A candle on an upturned crate. A plastic bag holding school exercise books. Joel sat cross-legged in the center, not eating yet. His head tilted toward the door, toward the corridor. The way a bird on a branch tilts its head before flying. This boy was not simply poor and frightened, Ethan realized. He was trained by something specific and deliberate. Someone had taught this child that the world outside was searching for him, and that being found was not the same as being saved. Ethan waited in the stairwell for a long time. The building settled around him, small creaks, the wind pressing through plastic sheeting above. Outside, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Inside the room, softer sounds. A spoon on a container, Joel's voice asking a question. Mara answering in a low, even tone, the way you speak when you are keeping someone calm with your voice alone. Then silence. The slow, heavy silence of exhaustion winning. Ethan looked through the gap again. Mara had laid her coat over Joel like a blanket, tucking the edges under the mattress. The boy's eyes were closed, his breathing slow and deep. Mara did not lie down. She sat on the bare concrete floor beside the mattress, back against the wall, knees pulled up. Her uniform was still on, her shoes were still on. She rested her head against the wall and closed her eyes. Then her stomach growled, loud in the silence, a long, low sound. Mara pressed one hand flat over her stomach as if she could push it quiet, as if hunger was something to be ashamed of, as if she had given away her right to it. Ethan stepped back into the dark. He had eaten a 4-course dinner that evening. He had left 2 courses untouched. Ethan did not leave right away. He moved carefully down the corridor and was turning toward the exit when something on the far wall stopped him. A photograph. Small, printed on regular paper, held with tape at each corner. It was pinned between 2 of the children's drawings as if it belonged there, as natural as the yellow suns. Ethan leaned close. The photo showed 2 people. Mara, younger, thinner in the face, but with the same careful eyes. Beside her, a man. Broad-shouldered, one arm around her, laughing at something outside the frame, but the man's face was partly burned. Not in real life, the photo itself had been damaged. A scorch mark had eaten through the paper, taking the left side of his face. Below the photo, in a child's large block letters written directly on the wall itself, "Don't let them take me." Ethan read it once. Then again, he stood in the dark corridor for a long time. When he finally walked back to his car, he did not feel the cold. He felt something else. A slow, crawling certainty that he had stumbled into something much larger than a waitress stealing leftover soup. 3 nights later, Ethan arrived at the building earlier than usual. He had told himself he was only observing, gathering facts before deciding what to do. But when he reached the corridor and heard the sound from inside the room, all his plans for patience collapsed. A crash. Then Mara's voice, not the calm, controlled voice from every night before, high and cracked, stripped of everything practiced. Joel, stay with me." Ethan pushed the door open. The boy was on the floor beside the crate. He had tried to reach the water bottle on top, and his legs had given way. He was not unconscious, but he could not hold himself upright. His hands pressed weakly against the concrete, trying to push up and failing. Mara was already on her knees, one arm behind his back, pulling him up. Her face was the face of someone watching a nightmare repeat. "No, no," she whispered, voice breaking. "Stay with me, please, I'm here." She pressed the water bottle to his lips. He drank in small sips, eyes barely open. Ethan stepped fully into the room. Mara's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide, then cold and hard, the way eyes go when terror becomes a wall. "Get out," she said. Ethan did not move. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice quiet, hands visible. "Get out." Mara pulled Joel closer, placing herself between the boy and Ethan. "You don't belong here." "He needs a doctor, Mara." "Don't say his name." "He's dehydrated. He needs—" "If you call anyone," she whispered, "they will take him. Not to somewhere safe. They will take him and he will disappear and there will be nothing I can do." Ethan looked at her. Really looked. For the first time without the distance of a CEO assessing a situation. He saw the shadows under her eyes, the tremble in her arms from holding the boy's weight, the way her body angled forward, ready. She was not being irrational. She was being exactly as rational as a person can be when the system that is supposed to help has already shown what it does instead. "All right," Ethan said slowly. "No calls, no authorities. I only want to help him tonight." Mara stared at him. Joel made a small sound and pressed his face against her shoulder. The silence lasted a long time. Then Mara said, barely above a whisper, "There's a pharmacy 3 streets over. He needs electrolytes." Ethan nodded once and turned for the door. He came back in 20 minutes. Electrolytes, 2 water bottles, biscuits, a small torch that actually worked. He set them on the crate quietly, without announcement, the way you place things down when you know the room is fragile. Mara gave Joel the electrolytes slowly, coaxing him to drink between each sip. After the first bottle, color came back to his face. His eyes grew more focused. He looked at Ethan from across the room with the old carefulness, but he didn't ask Mara to make him leave. Ethan sat on the floor near the door, not close, just present. When Joel finally slept, Mara sat back against the wall with the empty bottle in her hands, staring at it. Then she spoke. Not to explain herself, not to ask for anything. She spoke the way people speak when they have been silent so long that one crack is enough. "His father was sick for the last year of his life," she said, touching the bracelet. "We worked together. He trusted me." She paused. "In the hospital 3 days before the end, he held my hand. He said Joel had no one else." She closed her eyes. "He said, 'Promise me. Whatever happens, don't let them take him.'" She opened her eyes. "I promised." Ethan drove home at 2 a.m. His penthouse was warm. Lights came on automatically. Warm gold, the kind of light that costs money to look soft. On the kitchen counter sat a silver dome. His housekeeper always left something for late nights. He lifted the dome. Roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread still faintly warm. He looked at it for a long time. Then he put the dome back and walked to the window. The city spread below him in patterns of light and dark. He had always loved this view. It had felt like proof of every early morning, every hard decision, every year he had worked when others rested. Now it felt like something else. He thought of Mara pressing her hand over her stomach in the dark. He thought of Joel's trained way of listening for footsteps before relaxing. He thought of the drawings on the wall. Those careful yellow suns put up to make ruin feel like a home. He thought of a dying man's last request. Don't let them take him. Ethan was not a man who let feelings lead him. He gathered facts and made decisions. He walked to his study, opened his laptop, and started with the one thing he had, a name etched on a faded bracelet. He called his head legal advisor at 7 the next morning. "I need the original property acquisition records for the hotel, all of them, including anything sealed or archived. Sir, some of those files were locked during the—" "I know. get them anyway. By noon, the records were on his desk. 3 folders and a digital archive going back 14 years. Ethan worked through them with the focus he brought to large deals, systematic, patient, looking for anything that did not fit. He found it on the 42nd page of the 3rd folder. An incident report. Filed internally, never sent outside the company. Dated 6 years ago. A junior building contractor had discovered that safety certifications for the original hotel construction had been falsified, that the company responsible had cut corners, causing one structural failure that was covered up and never reported. The complaint had been buried. 3 months later, a handwritten note in the margin. The contractor had been offered a settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. Ethan turned the page slowly. The contractor had refused to sign. The name at the top of the report was David Scene. Ethan's hands went cold. On the bracelet, DS. He went back that evening, alone, no driver, no assistant. He carried 2 bags, one with warm food from a proper kitchen, the other with plain blankets, still in packaging with no hotel logo so they would not feel like charity handed down from above. He knocked. Silence. Then Joel's voice.
Who is it?
The man from last night. I brought food. A pause. Then Mara.
Joel, step back.
The door opened 3 inches. Mara looked through the gap, reading him the way she read every room, searching for danger first. Her eyes went to his hands, to the bags, back to his face.
You're alone?
Yes.
No cameras? No phone recording?
No. She opened the door. Joel stood behind her, one hand gripping the back of her shirt. He looked at the bags with eyes that were trying hard not to show hunger and failing. Ethan set the bags on the crate without ceremony. I'm not asking you to trust me tonight, he said. I just want you both to eat. Mara stood without moving. Joel let go of her shirt and took one small step forward. It was Ethan's first real victory in that building. Not power, not persuasion, just patience and warm food at the right moment. The next morning, Ethan sat with his lawyers for 4 hours. I need to establish emergency legal guardianship for a minor, quietly, without triggering any shelter or social services referral. His lead lawyer raised an eyebrow. That's possible through private petition, but it requires the current guardian. She's not formally the guardian, that's the problem. Then we must establish her as one first, which requires do it. Ethan, this takes minimum 3 weeks, and any slip could trigger the exact referrals you're trying to avoid. Then don't slip. He had his property team identify a small apartment, quiet building, no hotel branding, good locks, a place that felt like a home, not a placement. The lease would be in Mara's name, but going back through the incident report that afternoon, Ethan found something that stopped him cold. A second note. Same handwriting that had buried David Saney's complaint. It read, referral made to partner agency. Child placement suggested as leverage. Ethan stared at the words. Child placement suggested as leverage. They had known about Joel. They had used the threat of the shelter not as a welfare concern, but as a weapon to silence a man searching for the truth. And David had refused to be silenced anyway. Ethan went to Mara. He sat across from her on the concrete floor, no desk between them, no power, no distance, and placed the copied page of the incident report where she could read it. She read it slowly. Her jaw tightened. Then she looked at the ceiling, blinking fast. You knew David? Ethan asked.
We worked at the same site. He found the falsified records. He tried to do the right thing.
She paused.
He wasn't afraid for himself.
She touched the bracelet.
After he refused their agreement, the threat started. Then he got sick. Real sickness. But the stress made it faster. Near the end, he told me the shelter threat was how they controlled him. That if he kept talking, Joel would be taken somewhere with no questions asked.
She looked at the page.
He died believing he had failed his son.
Her voice dropped to almost nothing.
That is why the promise mattered so much.
Ethan was quiet. David's original complaint still exists, he said. The buried report. This note about Joel. It's enough. If I take this forward, I can dismantle it. Mara looked at him.
You built this company,
she said.
You benefit from what was covered up.
Yes. Ethan said. He did not look away. I did. It took 6 weeks. Ethan had considered the quiet route. A private settlement, sealed records, a careful rearrangement that kept his company protected. He chose the other route. He brought the original complaint, the buried report, and the note about Joel's placement to an independent legal body himself. He made the referral in writing, with his name attached. His lawyer said it was the most reckless decision he had ever made. He signed the letter anyway. 3 former executives faced formal investigation. The firm behind the falsified certifications was reported to the relevant board. The records were released. The legal guardianship petition for Mara went through in the 4th week. In the 5th week, Ethan's team handed Mara keys to a 2-bedroom apartment, quiet street, good locks, a small garden. The lease was in her name. A 12-month trust managed by his lawyer meant she would not need to come asking. He did not attend. He did not want it to be about him. He found out through his lawyer that Joel stood in the kitchen for a long time without touching anything. Then he walked to the front door, listened to the quiet street, and closed it again. Then he sat at the table and ate a full meal without listening for footsteps. Some months later, Ethan received a letter, not an email, a real letter, handwritten in careful script. Dear Mr. Vale, Joel started school last week. He was nervous, but he went. He came home and told me what he learned. I made dinner, and we ate at the table together. I don't think you know how much that means, to eat a meal and not be afraid. I still wear the bracelet. I will wear it until the cord breaks. He asked me to make a promise, and I kept it. Keeping a promise is not always easy. Sometimes it costs everything. You lost something too. Money, reputation, time. You chose to lose it. Joel is safe and I am not hungry, and the yellow sun drawings are on our new wall. Thank you. Mara. Ethan folded the letter and placed it beside the copied incident report on his desk. He looked out the window at the city for a long time. He thought about who he had been before the gray door, before the alley, before a child's voice asking, "Did they see you?" He had been a man who noticed everything in a room except the things that mattered most. He was still learning to see, but learning. And sometimes that is enough to begin.
If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded. One kept promise, one act of courage, one person who finally chooses to see. These things quietly change the world.
Share this story with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.